Hey Nat. Hi, Terry.
Hi. Hey, Nat, how are you?
I am doing well. Do you desire to be able to share anything from your screen or turn your camera on? We have you as like an attendee right now.
No, I'm okay as is, unless you guys want me to do something.
Absolutely. Whatever you feel comfortable with, you still have, you should be able to still use the chat function and if you need anything. And then also you should have the voice function. And if you need to share your screen or share your camera, I can turn that on for you whenever you need it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, that's all right.
Terry, just also wanted to bring to your awareness, the minutes from last meeting were included in the packet, but you needed to click on the PDF to see it. The hyperlink fell off in the posted agenda, but the PDF, which was posted for the public and for the commission on page 5, includes the meeting minutes from last meeting.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Welcome, Dwight.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing well, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here tonight. You are currently an attendee to the meeting, and you should be able to use your chat functions as part of the Zoom meeting. You should also be able to mute and unmute your microphone. And this includes a public hearing and a presentation, and the commission will call on you if there's anything that you would like to share with them tonight after Britton provides her presentation.
Okay, and I don't have to do anything to know that I'm going to be able to say a little something?
No, sir. We will make sure that you're aware when it's your turn to speak. And do you think that you'll need to show anything from your computer or your screen?
No, sir, I don't think so.
Great. Well, thank you for being here and for spending time with us. And we'll call on you when it's your chance to address the commission.
Okay, and I appreciate y'all doing this. I know these are trying times, and I appreciate your effort.
Hi, Nat. This is Myrna.
Hey, Myrna.
Sorry. I don't know what happened with the link for the minutes item. The minutes are in the packet, the PDF, but for whatever reason, that didn't get checked off, so it's not an actual link like the other ones.
Right. Yeah, I do see that they're in the PDF that was posted. So the commission is able to move forward with those minutes tonight.
And it happened, I think it did happen to housing. It happened with another meeting, I think last week or the week before, where that happened. I don't know why.
Good evening, Chair Parr.
Hello, Nat. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much. So far on the call tonight, you have Britton, myself, Sophia. You also have Myrna, and then Commissioner Hyde is present, and then one of our applicants, Mr. Richter, is also joining us for the meeting tonight so far.
Okay, thank you. Do we know if there are going to be any commissioners not present yet?
Mr. Browner said he'll listen in, but he most likely won't participate tonight.
Okay, so our alternate is Robert.
It is Pam.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Parr, also just want to share with you that the minutes for the meeting this evening are in the PDF on page 5. The hyperlink did not make it over the internet, but those minutes are posted for you and the public, so you should be able to move on them tonight if the commission chooses.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Britton.
Yes, ma'am.
The sunlight is really making it difficult to see you. I don't know if you can close those. Do you have blinds?
No, but I can move my laptop back to where it was. Is that better?
Yeah, it's a little better. Thanks.
Hopefully we'll get to some lower sunlight here shortly. I know I have this glow behind me.
You do. You look like an angel, as you are.
I did that on purpose. That's why I sit at my desk for these meetings.
Brennan.
It'll be a shame in wintertime where it gets dark earlier and I don't have the same opportunity. But
No, I tend to move if you see me move my laptop around, it's because when it's open, so that I want to make sure that y'all can see me when I present. I think it helps orient people in the meeting, but the downside for me is that it covers 2 corners of my screens. And so sometimes when I'm trying to see some detail or trying to see something, it's really hard to kind of see. And if I keep lowering and raising my laptop screen, then that probably looks pretty bizarre too. So sometimes it's just to get to stuff, but I think I'm all set up now, so.
Good evening, Ms. Morales and Mr. Johnston. This is Nat. Thank you for being here tonight. You have the ability to mute and unmute your microphones. You can also use the chat function, but if you need to share your screen or would like your video camera turned on, just please let me know. Ms. Curry, also welcome to the meeting tonight. In your packet online on page 5 are the meeting minutes for this evening. There was a hyperlink that was included in the agenda that didn't make it into the packet, but it was posted for you and the public, and so the commission can move on that tonight if it so chooses when that first item is up.
Nat, if you want me to show, or I see, how do I get video to show? Because I thought I enabled it.
Good evening, commissioners. This is Nat. I'm going to be helping Britton host the meeting tonight. Sophia is also on the line. Appreciate those commissioners who are wanting to turn on their video. You also have the mute and unmute functions as well as a chat function. So if there's anything that you need that I can help with from a video perspective, please let me know. We do have a pretty full agenda tonight, and we do have several of our applicants that have already joined the meeting. There are public hearings associated with tonight, so they'll have their opportunity to address the commission. Ms. Parr, we did talk earlier. You do have 7 commissioners here this evening, and it's my understanding that Mr. Browner may not be joining us this evening, in which case we do have the commissioner in training. And Myrna, did I understand you correctly that tonight it would be Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Okay. I don't yet see Ms. Mitchell here in the meeting, but we do have Commissioner McCabe, who is standing by and has joined the meeting as well.
Okay, so Nat, just for clarity, so is everyone except for Art? Because I didn't see Carolee.
I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Carolee. Okay, so are we ready?
Yes, ma'am, you do have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, good evening. This is Amanda Parr, the chair of the Historic and Architectural Review Commission. Thank you for joining us this evening. The time is 6:02 p.m. and I would like to welcome everyone to our meeting of the City of Georgetown Historic and Architectural Review Commission. The Historic and Architectural Review Commission, appointed by the mayor and city council, is responsible for hearing and taking action on applications for certificates of appropriateness based upon the city council adopted downtown and old town design guidelines and the Unified Development Code. This virtual meeting format is different from the regular meetings at City Hall, but we will still follow a similar meeting format. We will consider the cases scheduled for this meeting individually as follows. Staff will make a presentation of the case, and then I will give the commissioners an opportunity to ask questions to staff. After the staff presentation, the applicant or their representative will have up to 10 minutes to present or provide comments on their project if they choose, followed by questions from the commissioners. Once staff and the applicant have addressed questions from the commissioners, we will open the meeting for the public hearing. If you would like to provide comments on the agenda item, please wait until I open the public hearing. When I open the public hearing, I will ask if anyone would like to speak, and if you would please unmute yourself and state your name. Once we have the name of everyone who would like to speak, I will call the names in order, and when your name is called, you will have up to 3 minutes. A speaker may allot their time to another speaker for a maximum of 6 minutes. If you wish to allot your time to another speaker, please indicate so when I open the public hearing. Please remember that all comments and questions must be addressed to the commission, and please be patient while we organize the speakers during the public hearing portion. You also have the opportunity to provide comments through the Q&A section of the live meeting located on the right-hand side of your screen. Please provide your full name and address for the record, and your comment will be read by staff. After everyone who is asked to speak has spoken, I will close the public hearing and provide a few minutes of rebuttal time to the applicant if they so choose. Following this set of questions, I will ask the commissioners for a motion and a second, followed by deliberation and any additional questions to staff or to the applicant. Then I will call for a vote on the motion. If the applicant or a member of the public has questions or concerns following a vote on an agenda item, please communicate those to the recording secretary outside of this meeting so that staff can follow up with you. You can provide your contact information through the Q&A section and request follow-up. You can call the planning department at 512-930-3575, or you can email historic@georgetown.org. I would like to remind everyone to please state your name before you make any comments. That includes staff, commissioners, applicants, and members of the public who speak during the public comment portion of the meeting. If you are a member of the public, please also provide your address. The first agenda item is okay, item C, consideration and possible action to approve the minutes from the June 11th, 2020 regular meeting of the Historic and Architectural Review Commission. Has everyone been able to see those minutes? And do I have any edits to the minutes? Okay, not hearing any edits. I will call for a vote to approve the minutes. Commissioner Hyde?
I
Approve.
think you want to call for motion to approve.
I'm sorry, Catherine, thank you. I'll call to for a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
And
Thank
I'll second it since I'm on.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, so I have a motion to approve and a second. Commissioner Hyde,
Approve.
Commissioner Morales,
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston,
Yes.
Commissioner Curry,
Yes.
Commissioner Parr, yes. Commissioner Nunn,
Yes.
and Commissioner McCabe.
Yes.
All right, that motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item D. This is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for an addition to a street-facing facade at the property located at 1404 Maple Street, bearing the legal description of Lot 1, re-subdivision of Block 37 of the Snyder Addition. It's COA 2020-12-COA. Britton.
Thank you so much, Chair Parr. Commissioners, it's great to see y'all again after our break. And so just to check, can everyone see the beginning screen for this case, Fusco Casita at 1404 Maple Street?
Yep, I can.
Awesome. All right, let's get started. So this is public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for an addition to a street-facing facade at the property located at 1404 Maple Street, bearing the legal description of Lot 1, re-subdivision of Block 37 of the Snyder Addition. And the request before you, Commissioners, this evening is an addition that creates new or adds to an existing street-facing facade. And so the applicant built a swimming pool a couple of years ago, got a permit for that. Now that the pool is completed, they're looking to build a shaded roof structure directly west or behind the swimming pool. So this is a simple sketch showing the design. And then this is the location of the property. So they're at the southwest corner of Maple Street and East 14th Street. And this is a high priority structure. It's surrounded by medium and low priority structures, and then also close by are high priority structures in the Olive Street National Register Historic District. I have a new map to show y'all. I was able during our break in the HARC meetings to acquire the 1925 Sanborn Fire Insurance map series. And so they are more extensive view of Georgetown than we previously had in the 1916 surveys. And so this house is on the very edge of that map. So we were able to see in 1925 that this was the only house on this block. It was just next to the railroad tracks, and also it had a couple of accessory structures on the site, and those structures are still there today. So this historic house also has some historic accessory structures that have remained there. This is the 1964 aerial photo. We can still see the house pretty clearly, and the site looks to be about the same as it was back in 1925. And so, interesting story on this house. And we can see in the 1974 photo that it was still about the same site configuration. This house was noted in our historic resource survey as the Busey house, but it turns out in researching public records, trying to understand what this house was constructed and just a few other details that are related to this project, but not related to the certificate of appropriateness, I was actually able to determine that this house was built by a woman named Kate Gill. And so this might be better renamed the Gill House, and here it is. So kind of a simple Victorian structure, but very, very pretty. And we're glad to have this contributing historic structure today. So looking from the street, we can see that this property does have a privacy fence. And I don't know if you could see it very easily, but there is a pool behind that privacy fence. And what I'm using this photo to show is that that pool structure, although part of the street facade, which is why it's coming to you for review, it would, because of its low height, it would be pretty difficult to see from the street, and certainly being set so far back on the property would certainly not be very obtrusive. And so I have here highlighted the property lines are shown in kind of a light tan color, and then in red I've highlighted where on the site this is proposed to go. So behind the pool, or kind of to the west of the pool and along the back of the property. And so something that we don't talk about very often, commissioners, but something that's important to this question today, oftentimes if a structure is proposed that would be set this far back, we would be looking at a setback modification. In this case, the applicant had kind of started out with a little bit taller structure, but our code does allow for accessory structures to be built within the setbacks and within 3 feet of the rear property line, as long as the height is 8 feet or shorter. And so the applicant is proposing a design. This is kind of the original concept sketch, which shows 9 feet and then 7 feet, but really they got down to the 8-foot roof height, the way that our code defines it. And so even though it will be in a setback, it is not required to have a setback modification because it meets an exception in our Unified Development Code. And so that's why we're just looking at the addition to the street facing facade and not needing a setback modification, even though it's in the setback. It is not within 3 feet of the rear property line. So that's why they are able to do that. It meets the code. But this is a concept sketch showing kind of an idea of what they're looking to build and to have in the backyard. And so when staff reviewed the application and the materials, we found that it complied with 7 of the 8 criteria. The master sign plan criteria did not apply in this case because no signage is proposed. And so 2 signs were posted on the site. Staffers received no public comments on this application. And so staff is recommending approval of the request. And commissioners, just as a reminder, you have 4 options available to you as you make a motion. You can move to approve the application is presented by the applicant, to deny is presented by the applicant, to approve the application with conditions. If you do have conditions, please be specific about what those are. And then if you do find a need to postpone, please let staff know what information you might need so that we can bring it back to you with more complete information. That concludes my presentation. The applicant did not have a presentation to make. I'm not sure if they're on the call or not. We might just check.
Thank you, Britton, for that presentation. My understanding is that Chris Fusco is not here on the line tonight, so she doesn't have any remarks to share.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Britton. Commissioners, what questions do we have for staff? Okay, not hearing any or seeing any. I want to make one point of clarification. Robert, if you will please go ahead and vote on this item. Commissioner Mitchell has joined us and I will call her up for our next item. But Robert, if you plan to go ahead and vote on this item.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, not hearing any questions or seeing anyone raising their hand on the video, I will ask for a motion.
This is Carol Lee. I so move that we accept the presentation or accept this COA.
Thank you, Carol Lee. Do I have a second?
I'll second it. It's Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. I have a motion to approve as presented. I'll call for the vote. Commissioner Hyde.
Approve.
Commissioner Morales,
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston,
Approve.
Commissioner Curry,
Approve.
thank you. Commissioner Nunn,
Yes.
myself, Commissioner Parr, approve, and Commissioner McCabe.
Approve.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries. Moving on to our next item.
All right, so this is 701 South College Demolition. And this is COA number 2020-19-COA. This is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of a low priority structure at the property located at 701 South College Street bearing the legal description of Block C of Clamps Revised Edition. And so the request to you commissioners this evening is for the demolition of a low priority structure. And here it is. So you may be familiar with the bright blue house on College at the corner of College and 7th. So here it is. This sits on the southeast corner of College Street and East 7th Streets. And commissioners, I am grateful for the opportunity to present this case to you because it does give us the window back into Georgetown's history that I hope is valuable to our conversations about historic preservation, and also gives me the opportunity to show you, again, some of those new tools that I've been able to acquire for us over our break. And hopefully that's informative to the decision-making process. This house does have an interesting history, and I am glad to have been able to locate some photos that I hope help share that information with you as you are asked to make this decision. And so current context, this is a low priority structure that is surrounded by high, medium, and low priority structures. This is not in or near National Register Historic District, but is certainly very close to our downtown and also in a part of our Old Town Historic District, in which there are a lot of really beautiful homes with a lot of character that we really enjoy. And so this has a history that goes back further than I normally get to go. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the property too, because the two things are tied together closely. And so this property has associations with Georgetown's first fire chief, M.Z. Taylor, and also a man named Christian Augustus Daniel Clamp, who was an immigrant to Texas from what was then kind of Prussia, Germany, is today Poland. And so he had buildings downtown, and both gentlemen have been recognized by historic markers in the city of Georgetown. So what I've highlighted on this map is Block C of Clamps Revised Edition. This property was replatted. I do not know the information on the original plat, but Georgetown started out as what George Glasscock sold to Williamson County, and he laid out Georgetown, and then he laid out Glasscock's addition, and those were the blocks that created kind of the original bit of our city. And over time, additions were made to the city of Georgetown, and so this is part of adding land to the city. And in doing that, one had to file a plat, and that plat established the blocks and sometimes lots within those blocks, and also the streets. And so in this, Mr. Clamp laid out the blocks for his addition, and instead of numbering them, he gave them letters. And so this happened back in 1880. He probably wrote this document himself, and that was recorded with the county clerk. And so in 1916, which is the earliest the Sanborn maps stretch out this far away from downtown, we're able to see half of Block C of Clamps Edition, and we're able to see this house. And so we can see it has an L shape. There's a D on it. It's yellow, which means that it's a dwelling. And then there's a marker that shows us it's a one-story house, and it's got these dashed lines that show that it had a porch that wrapped the west and south sides. And so the house that you see today is very similar in form to the house that we can see here in this 1916 map. So if we go to the 1925 Sanborn map, that expands out a bit more, and we're able to see the full Block C. And so this shows us the house, which looks the same as it did in that 1916 map, with also two accessory structures. What looks to be an outhouse of sorts, and then also what we can see later as being a barn there kind of on the far east corner. And so this, in this map, this is kind of separated and sits off by itself. Pennaquid Street was eventually abandoned by the city, and that's why you don't see a street there. And it looks like the block C and B look like one contiguous block today, but they were actually created as two separate blocks back in the day. So here we see it in 1925. And then here we have a little bit of a mystery. The 1940 correction to the 1925 map. And I'm not sure what they were correcting yet. I'm still going to have to look into it. But the 1940 correction shows what was on the ground in Georgetown in 1940. And so we can see that by 1940, we have a fourth box on this block. And it also has a D, which indicates that it's a dwelling. It has a 1 that indicates it's a single story, and it looks like it may have had a small porch, and that it faced toward East 7th Street. I don't have any information about that house. It's a bit of a mystery to me. I know through deed records that that house was not sold off as a separate, it wasn't separated from the whole property and sold off. It remained part of that property. And so, but we don't have a picture of that house, and I haven't been able to find any detail about it. So sometimes when you get new tools, it's really exciting, and sometimes it's also a little confusing. So a little bit of a mystery there. I was also able to acquire this 1886 photo that comes from the Austin History Center, and would just like to take a moment to enjoy this view. This is from the Williamson County Courthouse, the 4th courthouse, I believe, not the courthouse that we have today. This is looking east from the courthouse, and right in the foreground, you can see buildings that were on the east side of the square. Only 2 of those buildings are still there today. One is the building that has a little triangular top toward the lower right-hand portion. That's the building that we today know as the Georgetown Winery. And then you can see Pebworth's Barbershop, Georgetown. That building has been replaced by the building that now is home to the Escape. And then directly left of that is one of the other buildings that's still there. That is Mikey V's Hot Shop, or that's the business that we've known to be there for a long time. And then to the left of that are CAD Clamps buildings in their initial form. And so the gentleman who platted this addition to the city and who sold this particular block to have a house built on it is also the gentleman who owned the buildings that are in the lower left-hand corner of the photo. And so this is a really fun resource because it helps us to see what Georgetown looked like at the time that this house was constructed. And that's kind of a rare glimpse for something that's been around for this long. We can see other houses in the background. Some are still there and some are not. But what I've highlighted is toward kind of where the road diverges in the background is a house that's a little bit blurry, a little bit difficult to see, but I do believe that that is this house because I suspect that this house was built about 1882 based on public records. And there is a deed from 1876 in which a gentleman had written into the deed that on a whim and for fun, for the sum of $225 in gold, he was going to pay MC Taylor and CAD Clamp for the block and to build a house. But if he did have a house built, it would have been very small. And then by the time that Sarah Nichols owned this property, it looks like she is most likely the one to have constructed this house. So when things go that far back, it can be a little bit challenging. You know, sometimes there's just a little bit of mystery to it. But my best guess is that Sarah Nichols is the one who built this house about 3 or 4 years before this photo was taken. So it would have been fairly new, and it kind of faced toward downtown as it does today. So this is a 1934 photo that I've borrowed from Southwestern Special Collections. And in this photo, we can see a few things. We can see the house, and we can see that it's in the L shape that we would expect. We can see the chimney out of the center of the roof in the same location that it is today. It looks like we can see the outhouse that we saw in the 1925 map, and also that barn is the structure that was indicated on the corner. What I don't see in this photo is the house that was indicated in the 1940 map. And then also in this 1964 aerial photo, it looks like all of the accessory structures had been removed by that time. I have seen another photo from 1958 in the Southwestern yearbook from that year that I was not able to see anything other than this house in that photo either. And so it looks like by 1958 and certainly by 1964, the only structure that was still on this property was the main house. And then the 1974 aerial photo, I apologize, it is very blurry, but it doesn't give us any kind of different information from the 1964 photo. And so in 1984, there was a remodel to this house, and it was kind of unusually captured in our historic resource survey, which was being accomplished at the time. And so at the time that we were surveying historic structures in the city of Georgetown to create a listing of all of our historic properties, and this was an effort that was undertaken by the group that is now Preservation Georgetown. And we thankfully have a lot of documents that help us to understand what was going on at that time. But we have this photo that shows this house was being remodeled, and the Historic Resource Survey noted on the survey form that the remodel was removing a lot of the historic fabric, and that even though this was clearly a very, very old residential structure, the changes were maybe not necessarily respecting that. And so if anyone asks you why we have so many rules for Old Town today, that's why, so that we can try to preserve our historic fabric. But what we do have is a letter from the owner at the time. This is in a file at the library. And they had looked into the history of the property, tried to understand it, and they had provided a little bit of information talking about the foundation beams and ceiling joists are logs, which have bark remaining on some sides, so they would have been kind of rougher hewn lumber. And that makes sense for the time that this house was constructed, because Georgetown had only very recently gotten a railroad and were only very recently able to have access to finer quality building materials. There were still a lot of houses around this time period had to be constructed out of materials that were kind of harvested locally. So either local stone, local lumber had to be cut down and milled or hand hewn. And so you tend to have some rougher lumber as the framing pieces for these houses. It all said further, some saplings have been used for uprights in some areas. And then some interior walls have been partially removed. Exterior paint is in evidence. And so what we've learned from this is that there have been some changes to this house over time. It looks like a lot of the historic fabric has been removed, unfortunately. And so that's kind of where we get today with, we have a house that maybe doesn't read as very historic, even though it is a very old house and indeed one of the older houses in Georgetown. And so this is another photo, a color photo from 1984. When they were conducting this survey, you can see that the windows were new windows. In this case, they had been replacing sections of the porch, also sections of the roof, and then all of the siding had been replaced around the house. And so this gives us, again, a little bit of a picture. It's a little bit hard to tell, but what I'm able to see is that the house, today when you frame a house and you use 2x4s or 2x6s, everything's very standardized. You have a standardized lumber size, you have a standardized spacing that those are constructed in to make exterior walls. And you can see in the gable of this roof, we're able to see that the framing for the house was not very consistently spaced. And it looks like that lumber wasn't a very consistent dimension. And that's something that I would expect to see for a house that was handcrafted when the lumber had also been hand hewn or hand milled. And so you kind of get some rougher situations that can finish out really beautifully. But sometimes when you uncover those, you end up seeing construction techniques that we don't tend to see today. And some of that is really kind of an enjoyable feature of being able to uncover some of this older work. And so that's kind of the best hint that we have of it today. This is the house that the original siding has been replaced, the windows have been replaced, the front door, the porches have been replaced. So it does still retain its original fireplace and chimney, but then there are also some additions. So on the left side of this house, it's a little bit hard to see, but the porch kind of has what we call a hip roof. So in two places, it kind of joins the slopes and creates kind of an angle down to the porch post. At the top of that, where the porch roof meets the house, about that point is the point that I expect from there, and then to the left to the end of the wall. That looks like it's a later addition to the house. We're not sure where, but the property owner has shared that the roof, the ceiling height inside the house at that point is really, really low. So we think that that might be a later addition, and then definitely the two-story addition to the rear is a later addition and not part of the original house. And so I visited the site, and then our assistant building official, Mark Moore, visited the site. We had a demolition subcommittee and looked at the state of the structure. And this is unusual in that this house does not have a crawl space underneath it. The house is actually just about sitting on the ground. And so normally with the pier and beam foundation, you would expect that stone, or in some cases very durable wood piers, would be set into the ground and the house would sit up. So you would have to go up a couple of steps to get to the porch or to get to the house. In this case, the house is sitting so low to the ground that it's effectively sitting on the dirt. And the problem with that is that over time, it causes a lot of moisture damage. And the siding materials for the house have not really held up well over time. There's a lot of other moisture damage to the house that's really starting to show at this point. And this is the state, I think it's well worth noting here, this is the state that the current property owner acquired the property in. This is not due to neglect on their part. This is how the property was when they purchased it. They've only owned this property for a little over a year. And so in the photo where I'm showing in some of this detail, it's where the wood foundation beams are sitting really, really low to the ground. It looks like they're set on rocks. So the wood isn't necessarily just sitting on the ground itself, but it looks like they're sitting on rocks that are very low. And I really haven't seen this before. If you have a house that has a crawl space underneath, it gives you the ability to access plumbing, to run electrical, to do insulation, to do repairs to the floor structure. And if those repairs weren't successfully made or weren't made to a great extent during the 1984 remodel, then we could be looking at wood that's got some real decay. And so these are some additional photos of the exterior that the applicants provided, showing the damage to the siding materials, and on the outside, some damage around the foundation where there are some holes. They've also provided some interior photos showing some of the inside. And so the inside of the house doesn't necessarily read as historic. A lot of the finishes have been replaced over time. The applicant did share in the demolition subcommittee meeting that there are a few things that are causing some challenges. One is that the floor is very uneven to the point that things roll or spills might move very rapidly across the floor because it's not level. It's provided a little bit of a dangerous situation for some family members. So that kind of matches with some concerns I have about the floor beams and the floor foundation, what there is of it not being very stable at this point, probably due to some deterioration. And so what they did provide also is some photos from the attic where we can see some of that really old wood that's still in place, that's serving as the rafters that support the roof, and then also a portion of the limestone chimney. The property owner had shared that on the main floor in the main house, the chimney has been covered up with brick, and so they didn't know until they looked in the attic that the chimney and fireplace were originally actually limestone, which makes sense because we wouldn't have had brick in 1882. That would have been a very new material, and they would have used local stone. And so what I wanted to do, commissioners, is show you, when I say wood deterioration, what exactly does that mean? And what is the opportunity for that to be repaired? And so these are some photos from a house that was salvaged a year and a half ago now. And so this is showing what termite damage looks like. And so when a termite colony gets into even this really high quality old wood, this old growth wood that is very dense and hard, if a termite colony is successful in getting into that, it essentially turns the wood into paper, and it loses a lot of its strength. And so these are all structural pieces in this house that would need to have been completely replaced. The termites were no longer active. They had left and sought greener pastures, but the damage that they caused remained. And so when a termite colony does so much damage, that's when your structural members have the potential to start failing. So when we say there's termite damage, we really mean that the structural integrity of the wood members is at risk. And then when we talk about moisture, not the same as termite damage, but it also has a similar effect in that the wood tends to lose its strength and can start to kind of break down into little pieces. Instead of having these like kind of longer, stronger structural capabilities, it breaks down into little pieces that aren't able to hold up very well. And so these are some examples of what water damage over time can do to really old wood, and why past a certain point, it can be really difficult for us to bring historic buildings with us without doing some pretty substantial replacement of the wood. And so this is a survey that the applicants provided of the property. It's showing the houses that exist kind of there in the center. There's also a non-historic accessory structure that's a carport and apartment that's also on the site. And then I wanted to check and see what were the age of the structures surrounding it and kind of help to understand the context of this house. And so the earliest time that this house would have been built, according to public records, is in 1876. Although, as I shared with you, I think we're looking at closer to 1882, 1883, based on deed records and also based on the sale valuation of the property over time. But we have other structures surrounding that were constructed about that time period or mostly a little bit after. So everywhere from 1885 to 1890 to 1904. And so this is a part of Old Town that does have some really wonderful old houses still. And you saw some of those in the 1886 photo, but that 1886 photo even predated some of the houses that we still enjoy today. And so the applicant wasn't sure if they would be able to make the meeting because of a scheduling conflict, but they did want to share with you. They had received some questions about from neighbors, excuse me. They've received some questions from neighbors about what a new house might look like if they were approved for the demolition. And so they asked if I would share with you some concept sketches of what they are imagining a new house could look like. And this is not part of your consideration tonight, commissioners, but the applicant just wanted to share this information with you since they had already received some questions about that. And so when staff reviewed the application, we found that it either complied or partially complied with the applicable requirements. In 2 cases, the requirements were, or the criteria for approval were not applicable. And that was because there's no new building or addition proposed with this application, and also no signage is part of this application. And so 3 signs were posted on the site. You usually see 1 or 2, but this had 3 street fronts. So 3 signs were posted, 42 letters were mailed, and staffers received 1 comment in favor. And commissioners, you should have received that with the application materials. I've not received any additional comments on this application since then. And so this is a bit lengthy. Please bear with me. But as I talked about the damage to the wood, and really where staff is on this one, commissioners, and the reason behind our recommendation is that due to the age of the structure and it being situated effectively on the ground, staff's concern is that there is so much wood deterioration internally at this point that you would have to take the house apart to the foundation and replace a lot of material in order to be able to preserve this. And at that point, we don't see a need to reconstruct this house with new materials. A lot of the historic material was removed in 1984, so we no longer have the siding, the windows, or other parts of the historic fabric that we might want to preserve. The parts that are left are really, looks like the fireplace and chimney, which is the stone, and then what remains of the wood framing that survived the 1984 remodel. We do think that there is a lot of value to the city in being able to document this property and to provide a history that could be made available to the public. And we've done that previously when there's been demolition requests for properties, particularly if they have a significant history or are very old. We have the opportunity to, if a demolition is approved, then you have the opportunity to kind of open up the house and inspect the construction and see if there are things that we can learn from that period of time in Georgetown. But because we expect that there is so much deterioration at this point, there would not be a whole lot that would be able to be saved, and it would have to be replaced to the point that we just didn't see that there was kind of a reason to replace all of that versus to create an archive record from which people could continue to benefit in the future. So based on that, staff recommends approval of the request with the condition that the applicant provide an archive document to staff prior to the issuance of the certificate of appropriateness, to include at a minimum a floor plan, a site plan, a deed history, a narrative of notable persons, photos of the existing structure, and that the record be provided to the City of Georgetown in 1 digital format copy, as well as 2 bound hard copies for the city's records. And Commissioner, the reason for the hard copies is that we do We have previously, when we've made this condition to applications, those have gone to the Georgetown Public Library, and they are included with the reference materials. And so that so 2 bound hard copies for the city's records, and that the historic stone and wood materials be salvaged to the extent feasible. Additionally, that photos of the demolition and or salvage materials, construction methods and details, and a narrative of any findings discovered during the demolition and or salvage process be provided to staff within 90 days of the conclusion of the demolition process as an addendum to the archive document. And so I know that that was a bit lengthy, but after reviewing all of the information that we could find and looking at what the potential for preservation of the structure was, that's what staff felt to be our best recommendation to the commission. And so again, you have 4 options as you make a motion: to approve, to deny, to approve with conditions, or to postpone. And that concludes my presentation. The applicant wasn't sure if they would be able to join us this evening, and so we might just check and see if they have been able to join us.
Thanks, Britton. This is Amanda. Nat did let me know that the applicant is present. Pam, it is Pam, right?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, is there any additional information that you'd like to provide to the commission?
I don't have any additional information. I'm just here for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, what questions do we have for staff or for the applicant?
This is Pam Mitchell. I have a question. So externally, there's an indication of the wood being impacted, but it doesn't seem like there's any strong indication of wood damage from either the water or termites that you were able to visually see. So, and I know some of it's covered up, but you know, I mean, it's an old house, so we're expecting something, but I didn't, so that what you gave us examples of the wood damage because of water and termites and the softening of the wood, that wasn't visible from what I saw. Was there something else in the on-site demo visit that indicated more damage?
It was really difficult to see in the photos, and my apologies for that, because without starting to take apart some of the siding, we would have had to kind of break open part of the wall to be able to show that more effectively. But what Mr. Moore and I saw when we visited is that there is indication in the wood. So when you hit a corner, for example, you know, the wood is at a 90-degree angle. And what we were able to see in some of those corners where it was exposed is that the wood was kind of showing, it begins to kind of deteriorate in that you can start to see cracks in it in certain ways. And then, so that was kind of that corner indication Mark felt was a very clear indicator that there was a lot of water damage that we would expect. Did we see it directly? No, because we weren't able to get under the house. So that was challenging. Mark does usually try to do that if we're looking at a pier and beam foundation. And then he did see a little bit of evidence of termite damage, but not to the extent that you could see in the photo, because the only way to reveal that is to uncover the studs, essentially. And so we didn't do any kind of exploratory work. And so what I did show was definitely just as an example, not because that's something that I would be able to show you directly from the site. And a lot of that was based on seeing these conditions in other structures that have been taken apart. But you know, and Ms. Helgerson, you might be able to speak more directly to that, but we weren't able to see that finer level of detail, and no, I would not be able to provide that to you. So I didn't want to, we're trying to give examples and trying to give an assessment, but I don't want to mislead the commissioners and say that I directly saw things because it's more anticipating, mostly due to it sitting on the ground, which was a condition that we don't normally see.
Britton, this is Amanda. So Pam, also, one thing that we might want to talk about is the demo subcommittee, and Steve and I were both on the call. We were not at the property, but we were on the call. And, you know, this is a hard one because this property has so much history and Britton has now uncovered more history. But one thing that was provided was expert opinions. The applicant has had an architecture firm and also a structural engineering firm out to the property. Was everyone provided that information?
I don't think that those, I don't know that that was part of the meeting materials as an attachment to the demolition subcommittee report. And so my apologies for that. And that's where I might ask Pam, if you wouldn't mind sharing, I think this is a good question to ask Pam, if you wouldn't mind sharing your efforts toward remodeling the home and what some of your challenges have been in this process.
Yeah, so we went into the house fully planning to remodel because we too couldn't really tell from the outside. But every time I would have somebody come over to give us a bid, they would basically tell us, you're not going to be happy with it. We're going to have to take everything apart and start from new, and you're going to pay a lot of money. And they'd say, the one letter that I submitted, what he told me in person was, if you demolition the thing and then, you know, if you want to demolition it and rebuild it, give us a call. Other than that, we're not interested, because he just knew that that was effectively what they were going to do. And we were going to be so unhappy that we had to go through that process. Okay. And then I guess one of the biggest things is the foundation is so unstable that they felt like they would have to take off the top part of the house just so that they could stabilize the foundation and then rebuild that, especially because the roof is being upheld by the chimney. So it poses a real danger. Because you'd have to somehow remove the chimney.
To raise the house.
To raise a house. I will let my husband speak too, because he understands the process a little better.
Yeah, it's just that when the house has to be lifted off the ground, right? And a new foundation has to be created. And right now, according to the various people we had come out to bid that job, as they said, the roof is being held up essentially by the fireplace. And so the fireplace can't be lifted when you raise the foundation. You have to just take the fireplace completely down and then raise the house, and you could rebuild it, you know, put a new fireplace up. But that's why that was one of the main reasons they didn't want to take the job, because they said, you know, when we take the fireplace down, it could be that the entire roof will come in. So you have to take the entire roof off, and you have to take the fireplace out, and then, you know, essentially getting to the point where there's very little left of the house in order to move it and then you know, start over.
And just to clarify, Brad, y'all had a foundation company come out because you had looked at moving the house. And commissioners, I think it's really important to reiterate, we did not start this process with a request for demolition. The applicant has been working with staff for about 9 months at this point. And had originally submitted applications for remodel of the existing structures. And then over the series of time and them trying to find a contractor or architect that they could work with on their designs and to bring those forward to staff as part of a certificate of appropriateness application, they just continue to run into challenges. And their information that they received when they looked at moving the structure was essentially that we're just not going to be able to do that because the house will not survive a relocation. And so if y'all have any additional information to provide on that, that was one of the letters that was provided to staff when we had been exploring the notion of moving the house.
Yeah, and actually it was not only can we not move it, but we really can't fix the foundation, period, without just starting over. That particular Douglas, I think it's called Douglas Foundation, that particular company basically told us when we were all finished with the project, we would be lucky if we had an 8 to 10 foot stretch of wall left from the original piece. So after he told me that, I said, well, what am I holding on to? Like, it's just not going to work. And honestly, we haven't been able to find anyone to say yes. And we pretty much just reached out to the people that specialized in the Old Town area, because we figured they really know the old houses. They would know, one, the look we were going for, and two, what to expect. And they've all just kind of walked away from it like there's nothing here. It's not going to work.
Thank you. thank you for providing that context. You know, as the demo subcommittee, we were able to read through those letters, and it was important for me to hear from not only the homeowner, but from experts that we see regularly at our meetings, local architect, a local foundation company, to really talk a lot about why this wouldn't be able to be done. We talked a lot about other properties that are of this certain age that have been able to be rehabbed, but due to the foundation problems, it seems that we kept coming back to the foundation and how to really repair the foundation, which it doesn't appear that there's been a way to, no one's found a solution to repairing the foundation. But I do understand the concern with the age of the property and losing a historic asset. So
was there any indication in the home inspection, because you haven't had the house that long, that there was issues with the foundation?
Well, here's one for your children. We did not get the home inspected. We knew that there was going to be a ton of work. So we figured, well, we don't need to get it inspected. We're just going to do a complete remodel.
We did have contractors look at it. So we were looking more as to, you know, how much roughly would it cost to do a remodel and all that. So we had at least one, right, contractor look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have foundation experts out. That was the fatal flaw, I guess.
Yeah, so no, we didn't. It had actually been a rental. Y'all probably know this, but it's been a rental to college students in the area for years. And I think that's been part of the neglect.
The other question that I would have is, I know we talked in the demo subcommittee, but I think the other commissioners would value hearing this. You can see in some of the pictures, I couldn't tell specifically with the wood floors, because I know we've talked a lot about salvage of wood floors. But the understanding about the interior is that everything has been pulled out of the interior in the 80s remodel. So I couldn't even tell if, like, these wood floors, you know, in these small pictures look like they could be original, but can you all clarify what is still original in the house and what may not still be original in the house?
As far as the floors, the vast majority of it is now, the subfloor is plywood. All what would have been the original wood floors have been pulled up. I found one small section of original floor in one of a small closet, but the rest of it is plywood that looks like it was probably from the 1980, was 84, remodel 87, something like that. So it looks like they ripped out the entire subfloor and put in plywood. And then what's on top of that is either a vinyl, or there's a sort of a thin, is it wood even in the main part? There's a thin wood floor that's in the dining room.
And lots of carpet.
And lots of carpet, stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. What other questions do we have? Pam, did you get all of yours answered?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just down the street. I know that house next to me was, it has about a 6-inch. It goes from 6 inches to maybe a foot of space. They basically pulled all the flooring off because they had the same issue and redid the buttress, the foundation from underneath. I don't know who did it, but so I guess the point is that if that was an approach, then you wouldn't have to destroy any older wood because they took all the hardwood floors out. But that's not what's on the table. So no, I'm good. That's all.
And I have one thing I just want to clarify for myself. From what I'm hearing and what I understand, most of the historic part of the home is gone anyway. Is that correct? I mean, even if they could salvage this or fix the foundation or address some of these issues we're talking about, in 84, they pulled out almost everything that would have been historic. Is that correct?
That is the best that I'm able to determine, just looking at all of the siding. And I think this photo kind of best tells the story. And so looking at this photo, the only thing that I can identify as part of the historic fabric is the chimney and of course the fireplace under it kind of being that entire stone piece. And then also the framing for the house. And by framing, you know, they build a foundation today that usually looks like a concrete pad. At the time, it would have looked like wood beams that were tied together. And then they would have laid the floor across that. They would have put the walls up. The walls would have been very thin. Remember, this was built way back before we had electricity. So we had no electric lights. We had no air conditioning. In fact, this house was probably around 70 to 80 years old before it would have been air conditioned. And so it looks like kind of behind the tree, you can see in that gable roof end above the porch, you can see what I believe to be some of the original wood framing. And I expect that that's about all we've got left is if kind of the stick part of the house. So when you see a house built, you can see, you know, you've got all the lumber that goes up, and then that lumber gets covered up on the outside and on the inside. So if we remove the skin or all the finishes on the outside and on the inside, what we would have left is, I think, about what's left of the historic fabric. But all of the windows have been replaced. All of the siding's been replaced. The porches are not original, not even close. And based on this photo, it looks like they've rebuilt that porch pretty completely, because I don't know that any of those turned wood posts were original. It looks like they were kind of either, I'm not sure why the paint colors are different. It's just not necessarily a post type that I would associate with the house being that old. I don't know where we would have gotten a turned wood post because they would have had to come in on the train, essentially. Like, we didn't really have that in Georgetown at the time. And so part of staff's recommendation is not to not acknowledge the age of this house and that this house has a lot of significance because of its history and had a lot of significance in its original form. It's just that so little of that fabric is left. And it's staff's estimation that by the time this house were repaired to the point that it does need to be repaired, we would have lost so much of that historic fabric that it's effectively a demolition. And so that's what our recommendation is based on, although it's certainly the commission's decision to make.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the commission? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
We need to have a public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we've talked for so long, Britton, I just forgot about it. Okay.
It has been a while.
Yeah, let's open the public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Ms. Chair, I do not have anyone sign up to speak. I'd be happy to check the participants who are either phoned in or are on the line now. I don't think, no one has contacted me to sign up to speak. Myrna, do you have anyone?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Last opportunity to ask any questions or comments about this demo. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
It's Catherine Morales, and I will make a motion for COA 2020-19 to approve with the conditions for the archive record outlined on Britton's deck on page 33.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Austin, second.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion to approve with staff conditions and a second. I'll call for the vote. Commissioner Hyde?
Approve.
Commissioner Morales?
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston?
Approve.
Commissioner Curry?
Approve.
Commissioner Parr? Approve. Commissioner Nunn? Carolee, can you unmute? Unmute your phone.
Yes, sorry. Approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Mitchell?
Approve.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Britton, that was a very nice presentation.
Thank you very much.
This, I would like to acknowledge this was a kind of a difficult question due to the age, and the applicant has certainly done their part to work with staff on all other options. And after 9 months, this is how we ended up before you. But I did want to kind of try to use my best research skills so that y'all had good information. But thank you for that. Speaking of research skills, we'll now go, if it's all right with you, Madam Chair, we'll go to Dwight's Garage at 206 South Main Street, and that's 2020-27-COA. So this is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for an addition to a street-facing facade at the property located at 206 South Main Street, bearing the legal description of Lot 3 and the south portion of Lot 2 of Block 10 of the City of Georgetown. And so the request before you, Commissioners, is for an addition that creates a new or adds to an existing street-facing facade for a medium priority structure. And so this is the proposed design. And so this property is located on the very northern portion of our Old Town Historic District, very close to the Downtown Historic District. So you can see that it is on a block that is on the east side of South Austin Avenue, that it faces onto South Main Street, and it's just to the south of the corner of Main Street and West 2nd Street. And so this is a medium priority structure. It's surrounded by low, medium priority structures and non-contributing, and you can see that it is tucked into the very corner of Old Town where it connects to the Downtown Historic District. And the red dot that you can see at the bottom of the screen is actually the historic Williamson County Jail. And then there is another high priority structure on the other side of Austin Avenue. And so this is another house that just snuck in to the 1925 Sanborn map. And what's wonderful about being able to have this map added to our collection of resources is that the 1925 map was expanded out. And so this shows us a one-story dwelling with what looks like a front porch and a side porch. And this has proved to be fairly helpful to myself and the property owner, who have been trying to figure out the history of alterations to this house. And so here we have the 1964 aerial photo, and it looks like a tree was in the way and kind of blocked a lot of what we're able to see. So that wasn't a very clear picture, but we were able to see it a little more clearly in 1974. And so thankfully this photo was taken in the winter, and although it's not a particularly clear view, if you zoom into this scale, we can at least see that this is also kind of an L-shaped house with a few little accessory structures and a driveway. And then we have a 1984 photo from the Historic Resource Survey. This is part of the same collection of photos that we saw in the previous application, showing what the house looked like in 1984. And so what was kind of revealing to me is that it turns out that this is a Belford house. And so we're accustomed to seeing houses built by Charles Belford toward the center of town or more along South Austin Avenue and South Main Street. On the south side of University Avenue, our Belford National Register Historic District, recognizing Charles Belford, is on the south side of University Avenue. But it turns out that he built houses on the north side of Georgetown way back in the day. And so we're able to know that because there is a mechanics lien in the Williamson County Public Records. The Belford Lumber Company had a lien against this property. And so the Belford Lumber Company was engaged by Elmer Shell and presumably his wife Roxy in order to construct this house for them. But what we have been able to see, it's a little bit difficult to see with that tree in the way, but what we have been able to see is the house has gone through some changes over time. And so you could look at it and say, oh, well, obviously there are some changes because this is not what we would expect a Belford house to look like. But there are some elements that we know Charles Belford to have used pretty commonly. So the first are these porch columns. That's a significant part of a lot of Charles Belford houses. And so we see these columns on other houses that he's known to have built or remodeled. He's also used these columns on a remodel. And so my assumption, and it is an assumption only, but my assumption is that this is what he was able to order out of a catalog and get carried in on the train. And so he was able to provide these columns from his lumberyard to his customers who were building houses. And so
We have that feature, and then also Charles Belford is actually known to have built houses with this type of hipped roof. And so the roof might look a little odd and like it doesn't quite go with the house, but he did build houses with this kind of roof style that had really kind of tall, large attic spaces. And a few of those houses over time have used that attic space, added dormers to provide light and windows, and been able to use a second floor space, ultimately beginning with a one-story home. This house has had a lot of the original siding material covered up. These are the original wood windows from what we can tell, the door frames. You can see a little bit unusual for this house. There are 2 front doors going to the porch. And what the property owner and I are still trying to work out is what was added on at what time, because we think there might have been, based on the Sanborn map and based on what we're able to see today, we think there might have been a little bit of an evolution. So we can see a large tree stump in the front yard, and then there's also some indication of a path coming from the front porch that's really no longer there today. But the skirting around the house is a metal today. We don't believe that to be original. And also this house has had asbestos siding installed over the original wood siding. And so as we go around the house, you can see the asbestos siding in a little bit better detail. You can also see the metal panel for the skirting, but then you can also see the screens and those wood windows, which we're glad to have still with us today. And also a little bit of detail on those columns. So it's a very simple column. It's not one of the Grecian columns because the proportions are wrong. So the Greeks probably wouldn't say that this was one of theirs, but it's most similar to the most simple of columns, or a Doric column. And so the property owner currently has a carport, so kind of simple in construction. And what they are proposing to do, this is not a historic structure, but what they are proposing to do is to remove this carport and replace it with their proposed design. And so commissioners, we took some photos of the back of the house so that you can see where that breezeway connection is supposed to be going, and where that looks. And then you can see the back of the house has got a board and batten siding, although the skirting around the house continues to be that same metal panel. And so that's kind of consistently carried. We've been able to determine that on the back of the house, there have been some later additions. We're still trying to figure out kind of the series of events that led to some of what you can see here. You can see this section just on the right side of that door. And then there's kind of a porch beyond, and we're still trying to figure out exactly what the evolution is, because the Sanborn map doesn't quite match up to what we're looking at. And sometimes with older houses, it takes you a minute of looking to be able to figure out how things occurred. But there's also some rear additions to the house that the property owner's been able to identify. And so this is the drawings, the renderings for the proposed White's garage. So the applicant is a professional mechanic and is looking to a happy point of transition in his life in which he can pursue his professional skills as a hobby, and is looking forward to doing that, and is hoping to be able to construct a hobby shop on his property to serve as a garage, but also a space to continue the work that he does in kind of a less necessary and more enjoyable circumstance. So this is the proposed site plan showing the existing house, and then also, so this would be a proposed garage with a carport in front, replacing the existing carport, connected to the main house via a small breezeway. And then there's also a proposed shed included in this. And commissioners, the reason this is not part of what you're reviewing this evening is the shed is fully behind the house and is not part of the street facade. And so this is showing a plan showing where the additional concrete is proposed to go. And then also commissioners, not part of what we normally discuss in HARC meetings, but one of the reasons that the applicant is proposing this particular type of building is that he's proposing to install a vehicle lift. And in order to get sufficient clearance for the lift, which picks cars up kind of over your head so that you don't have to roll around on the ground to work on them. I'm not very familiar with that process. I let the professionals handle my car, but there's proposed to be a lift installed on the inside of this, so it would be able to function for the applicant to work on vehicles in the various ways that he would desire to. And so the carport portion to be constructed on the front would be kind of closer to the style of the house. and use very similar columns to kind of tie into the house in one of those more characteristic features, with kind of a simple gable roof over that, same slope as the slope of the garage roof. And so this is the part that is also proposed to have a board and batten siding, which I believe is to be a fiber composite siding. And so here we can see kind of a view from the back, kind of looking at what's proposed. And so we can see kind of a very simple model of the main house, and then you can see some more of the detail of what the applicant's proposing. And then here are some of the dimensions showing the height, and then also for the carport and then the garage and the breezeway. And so this was quite a large set of drawings, and I hope the commissioners had time to review that. This is looking at the north elevation, kind of looking from the backyard view from the house. And then this is also rear and the south side elevations. And then here's also a roof plan showing the standing seam metal in order to match the house. And so the applicant, this is proposed to be a prefabricated metal structure. And the applicant has a little bit more information about that, that asked if I could include some concept photos so that you could see. So I believe the applicant is looking to use a metal panel siding, which is different than what we normally look at. And commissioners, I think when I wrote the staff report, I might have accidentally had the wrong notation for the siding material. I think it should say partially complies, and I think that's reflected in this presentation now. But if I wrote that incorrectly, so in the staff presentation, there should be partially complies for the very first design guideline, because this is proposed to be a metal panel. It's proposed to be similar to a board and batten siding, and so kind of provide a similar effect, but not be an exact copy of a board and batten, and also proposed to work with this particular building style that the applicant has proposed. So here's some photos to give you an idea of what that would look like. And so here showing some context, this is kind of a very kind of northwest corner of Old Town, with some commercial structures nearby, and then close to Austin Avenue, and also some commercial buildings. And then, as I said, the Williamson County property that houses the old jail. And so when staff reviewed the application, we found that it complied or partially complied with the applicable review criteria. So commissioners, if you saw complies on criteria 4, that should be a partially complies. My apologies for any mistake there. And then the sign plan portion not being applicable because no signage is proposed. So staff had 1 sign posted and then has received 3 comments in favor this week. And so those comments had not been received as the time that this agenda was posted, but we received those this week, and you should have received those via email this morning. If any of the commissioners did not receive that and needs a copy of that, please let me know. And so staff recommends approval of the request because the applicant met most of the design criteria. And then also, although the metal panel is a little bit different of a material than we normally see, it was the history of changes to this house and the current asbestos siding. Staff didn't find that metal panel siding for a structure that was to be set so far back and to be screened by a carport, we didn't find that was too far from complying. And so we are recommending approval. And here are your motion options as usual. And so that concludes my presentation. The applicant is on the line with us in the meeting, does not have a separate application to make, but might have some comments. Or excuse me, a separate presentation.
Thank you, Britton. Okay, so the applicant is present. Would you like to make some comments to the commission?
No, ma'am, I'm here just if there are any questions that I can answer. I think Britton did a very thorough job of describing what I'm doing. And no, I have no comments.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Dwight Richter, if I was supposed to say that.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, what questions do we have for staff or for the applicant who's present?
Britton, this is Pam Mitchell, is there any consideration needs to be given with scale compared to the house? And maybe I missed that, but.
From a square footage standpoint, yes. And so one of the challenges is to what you see in the applicant's renderings is that the site slopes quite a bit in the front yard especially. And so that wasn't really picked up on the drawings, and the house was kind of approximated. And so what I'd like to go back to, the square footage is pretty close, and hopefully that's in the staff report. The square footage of this proposed addition, once you include the carport portion, the breezeway portion, and the garage portion, is very kind of generally large in comparison to the existing structure. So the existing structure does not have a lot of square footage. And so this is pretty large by comparison. And then also, so the height here, you're looking at a ridge height of 17 feet, 2¼ inches, and then an eave height of just over, I think, around 12'10". And so that is not taller than the existing house, but in the renderings that we saw, and let me see if I can get to the right page, the house was approximated. This wasn't a literal rendering, like a measured rendering. The house that I understand, it was just to kind of show the location. And so I don't believe the garage, and we might ask the applicant about this, I don't believe that the garage is taller, but in terms of relative square footage, it is around the size of the existing house. And so you're looking at quite a bit of square footage in addition to what's already there.
So applicant, would you mind addressing if the garage portion is going to be higher than the house?
The best I can tell, I believe the garage is 2 feet lower than the house.
Okay, and Britton, oh, I'm sorry.
No, the house is like somewhere around 19, and we're around 17 with the garage.
And Britton, we are required to look at the square footage of the carport.
Yes, so that would all be included, because anytime we have a solid roof structure, that's considered kind of part of your square footage. And so we're looking at this as all of the pieces together, and even that breezeway, it's acting as a connector piece, but that's still kind of roof square footage that we're adding to the site. So when we look at things like impervious cover and floor area ratio, we're looking at kind of the roofed built structures. And then when we're looking at this in comparison to the main house, you know, the main house does have an open front porch, but if you're looking at the way that that is massed, you're kind of viewing that, even though it's an open front porch, it kind of reads more as a solid structure. And I apologize, my PowerPoint's getting a little bit slow as I'm trying to back up to the photos of the house. So just because of the columns, the railing, you know, we have a roof structure. So I don't believe, I'd have to pull the staff report back up, and I apologize for not having that more handy. But when we're looking at this kind of existing structure and how that sits on the site and kind of our perception of the massing of that, and then we have this existing carport, still a roof structure that still is counting towards square footage. And then by comparison, the applicant is proposing a carport that is very similar in size to the carport that's there now, but then adding this garage behind it, and that garage is a fully enclosed structure. And so that's adding some mass also behind that carport. And so it's kind of the combination of all these things that's adding up to an addition that's essentially doubling the square footage of what's there now.
Last question, is the tree that you see in the picture of the existing carport, is that going to be affected? That one.
So we're gonna make sure we leave that tree. That's real important to me to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Thank you for that clarification. I also, in that rendering, was going to ask the question. I think it's just because it's a two-dimensional rendering that we're seeing. It looks like the height of that is higher, but the clarification is that the new garage structure would be lower than the roof of the existing structure. That's
Yes,
correct.
ma'am.
Okay.
I think if I'm on the right slide, I think this is the one that caused some concern, reasonably.
Okay. All right. What other questions do we have for staff or the applicant? Okay. So this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up or on the line to speak?
Chair Parr, I do not have anyone on my end. I did see that we had a new number join us, a 512-750-3384. I don't know if that is.
Hey, Nat.
Yes, Commissioner Hyde. Thank you.
Yeah, I got disconnected somehow, so I just called
Okay.
in. I can't see anything now.
Okay, great. I will
I'll try
email you another link. Maybe you can get in that way, but I think you're still, maybe with your packet and your call-in, still able to participate. Otherwise, Chair Parr could invite Commissioner McCabe to participate in this vote.
Okay, Terry, do you have enough of this to vote on this item?
Yeah, I'm fine with this one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will close the public hearing, not having anyone signed up to speak. I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the application as presented.
Thank you, Pam. Do I have a second?
Morales, all second.
Okay, thank you. So I have a motion to approve as written. I'll take the vote. Commissioner Hyde.
Approve.
Commissioner Morales.
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston.
Yes.
Commissioner Curry.
Approve.
Commissioner Parr. Approve. Commissioner Nunn.
Approve.
And Commissioner Mitchell.
Approve.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries. All right, last item. Well, not our last item, but our last project for this evening. Britton.
So this is the First United Methodist Church HVAC. HVAC, if you're not familiar, stands for Heating, Ventilation, Air Conditioning. 2020-30-COA. Thank you all for hanging in with me. Here's our last item. This is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for rooftop HVAC, mechanical, or communication equipment that result in modifications to the building facade at the property located at 410 East University Avenue, bearing the legal description of Block 2 of the Hughes Addition. And so the request to you commissioners is for rooftop HVAC, mechanical, or communication equipment that result in modifications to the building facade. And there's a secondary request to the HPO, which is for rooftop HVAC, mechanical, or communication equipment that result in no modifications to the building facade. So y'all are looking at the part that would change the building, and I get to look at the part that is just sitting on the rooftop. And so here is what we are looking at. This is different from what y'all often see in an application. So please let me know if you have questions or need some clarification, since this is a topic we don't see very often. First United Methodist Church is located on an entire city block. This is between Elm Street and Ash Street, and on the south side of East University Avenue, kind of kitty corner to the GISD Hammerlin Center campus. So this is a high priority structure. This is surrounded by other church buildings, by the GISD school building. It's close to some commercial, and the buildings surrounding it are high, medium, and low priority structures generally, although in limited cases, non-contributing structures also. And so this is where we get to go back further than usual in the Sanborn maps. And so we first see the Methodist Church in the 1900 Sanborn map. It was built before that, but this is the first time that we're able to see it on the ground. We're also able to see the same church building in 1905 and 1910.
And commissioners, one of the things that I thought was interesting and why we use these maps, because they're so informative, this church was built on a block that had other houses in its earlier times. And so whether those were houses associated with perhaps clergy members or with other members of the community, this was a church that in its early days was literally right in the middle of a neighborhood. And so in the 1916 map on the far left, we're able to see very similar to what we saw in the previous maps, the same in 1925. And so the 1925 map and the 1940 correction, I have in black and white. I don't have the color versions, unfortunately. In the 1940 correction is when we start to see, so this is the addition that was built around 1930. And that's when this block really starts to change. And as we know, the church has grown over time and has increased their presence in our Old Town Historic District. And so by 1964, we can see the church building with its addition from 1930 sitting on the site, and then also some other buildings on the site. In 1974, they had constructed a parking lot. And then today, the block is built up by the church with a small parking area, and they've also expanded to the east. And so the part that this new HVAC louver is going on, words that you probably haven't heard me use before, but basically a grill, an open air grill that will allow fresh air to enter the attic space of the church for the purposes of the new system, is proposed to go in the west gable end of the original church building. And so commissioners, this is kind of a very important building, not only to us, but also at the state and national level. This checks all the boxes. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. It is recorded Texas Historic Landmark, and it is a high priority structure on our Historic Resource Survey. And so this is to kind of further illustrate where exactly that louver is proposed to be installed. And then the architect has provided an image on the left showing what it looks like today. So if you were to stand on the rooftop of the addition and look back at the original church building, this is what you would see. And so there is a little access point that you can see, get that rectangle right now, but where they're proposing to install the louver, and hopefully you were able to get this, get a glimpse of that in the application documents, but the church needs a new air conditioning system. They're looking to install newer, more efficient condensing units, and they're looking to be able to have kind of better air conditioning for the church building. This is for their sanctuary and also for some other rooms that are in that original building. In order to do that, they need a larger volume of fresh air. And so air conditioning systems do not just recirculate air within a building, they also draw in a certain amount of fresh air in order to function more efficiently. And some of these newer air conditioning systems that can help keep us cooler in the summer also need higher volumes of fresh air. So in order to be able to draw that fresh air that they need for the system, the architect and the mechanical engineer are requesting approval to install a louver in the stone wall. And so here are some older drawings of the church, but the architect was using these to illustrate some aspects of the project. And so there are some existing rooftop condensing units. And so if you, at your house, you might be familiar with the big air conditioning unit. That's a condensing unit. That's what helps to get the air cooled. It helps to also draw heat out. And so you imagine that unit, that rather than being put on the ground, it's actually going to be put on the rooftop. And so they're proposing to take some of these larger, older condensing units and replace them with smaller, more efficient condensing units, which will kind of reduce their view from the rooftop. Our code requires that those units be screened. And so the architect is proposing to use a very simple metal screen, and that's part of what the HPO is reviewing. Although the parapet height, basically the height of the stone wall above the roof surface, is going to do most of that screening work. And so that it would be very difficult to see. But we would be able to see this louver, and so that's why we brought it to you today. And so part of what the architect has provided is a mechanical plan showing that there is a lot of work to be done in the sanctuary of the church in order to keep the congregants cooler when there's a need for air conditioning. And so this is a current street view photo, and you would be able to see the louver from about 2 blocks to the west along
University Avenue, also Highway 29. And so that's where I stood when I took this photo. The louver is meant to be it will be metal, but it's meant to be a paint color to blend in with the stone. So it would be as unobtrusive as possible. But this is more of a technical need that is generating this request, although we still do want to look at our guidelines. And so when staff reviewed the application, we found that it complied or partially complied with the applicable guidelines. In 2 cases, with the applicable review criteria, in 2 cases, they did not apply. But when we said partially complies with the Secretary of the Interior standards, so the Secretary of the Interior standards are one of our review criteria, and that's kind of historic preservation policy set at the national level for the treatment of historic properties. This is on the National Register of Historic Properties, and so I did want to be careful to highlight that. The reason that I said partially complies is because the preference is to not disturb historic materials for historic structures. However, in choosing the side of the church that is the most screened from view in order to install that louver, the applicant is proposing essentially the least obtrusive solution to their technical need in what they're proposing. And so 4 signs were posted. Staff has received no public comments on this item. And so staff is recommending approval of the request. And the staff report did include some information about how they were proposing to remove part of the stone and install that louver, but I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all might have about that. And then here are your options for a motion per usual. So that concludes my presentation. I don't know that the applicant had any separate presentation to make, and I don't know if they have joined us for this meeting or not. We might check in with Nat on that.
Thank you, Britton. Nat, is there anyone wanting to speak on this item, the applicant present?
I do not believe the applicant is present. I do have 2 folks, or three it seems like, from the general public that have been following along all evening. I don't know if they wish to speak, given that this is the last item, but I have not had anyone chat me or asked to sign up. Mirna, have you had anyone contact you?
No, I haven't.
Okay, thank you. Nat, we'll ask again when we get to the public hearing. I'll go ahead and see if any of those people want to speak, but let's address questions from the commission to staff right now. Does anyone have any questions for our staff? Okay, I just have one, Britton, just because of the age of this building and, we shouldn't disturb anything that, is in this level of a historic building. And this seems like a small, disturbance, but because it is, I just want to ask, is there any other way this could be achieved without adding that louver there?
Not without something that would be even more obtrusive. And so in order to, I'm trying to think of like the most sensible way to phrase this. And so in order to supply what is a pretty good size system, because they're looking to basically push cooled air through a series of ductwork and into what is a fairly large sanctuary. I don't know if y'all have had the opportunity to be inside this church building, but it's a large sanctuary with kind of a tall ceiling space. And so that requires a large volume of air. And what the mechanical engineer relayed to me when we kind of did a preliminary meeting with their design team to discuss requirements was that they basically, the system that they have today cannot cool a large enough volume of air to kind of satisfy the comfort level that's desired. And so in order to do that, and in order to get this air in, they need to use the attic space, which is where they have additional pieces of this whole system. And so the system is these ducts that move the air, and it's kind of these interior louvers that release the air kind of into the space. And so it all travels through a very specific pathway, but there are also a couple of mechanical components that some of them sit outside. Those are the condensing units, and they're meant to sit outside. So sometimes they sit on the ground, sometimes they sit on rooftops. It kind of depends on the building. But if they were to try to get that air ducted another way, the next likely scenario is something that you would probably see more on a metal building, because metal buildings don't have a strong enough roof to hold these condensing units. Is that usually these condensing units are placed on the ground, and then there is a metal duct that goes from the unit in kind of up the wall of the building and into the wall. And so you see this kind of large galvanized or shiny silver metal duct that goes into the wall at some point. The concern is that placing that ability to intake the air that's needed to supply the system, if they were to put it anywhere else, it would be more intrusive than where it is here. And my understanding of the project is that there's not a better way to accomplish getting the air that they need to supply the system. And one of the challenges that they're currently having is that they don't have a great way to intake that air. So I do know that they are working with an architecture firm and a licensed mechanical engineer on this project to design that to try to get better outcomes for the system than they're currently able to get.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Okay, not hearing any other questions. I will open the public hearing. As Nat mentioned, there are several people on the phone this evening. Is anyone wanting to make a public comment on this item?
This is Debbie Bray, and I'm the chair of the building committee at First United Methodist Church, Georgetown. And it was my understanding that Mr. Bryce, Alfred Bryce from the architecture firm Jackson Galloway, was going to be present today to answer questions that the commissioners may have. He must have been held up or had something else come up, but actually Alfred is here. Okay.
I am here, yes. I've been listening. I think Britton did a great job in presenting it.
Yes.
But go ahead. If you want to clarify anything, please.
That's okay. I will defer to you, Alfred, if you have anything else to add or if there are any other questions. But I did just want to say that the committee, the building committee, which has been in place now for about 9 months, has looked at a variety of different options. And given the size of the church and the historical nature of the interior of the church, this was after consulting with Jackson Galloway and the engineers, what we feel is the least obtrusive way to accomplish what we need to, which is to provide comfortable condition inside the building. So Alfred, I don't know if you had anything else to add to that.
No, I think you're spot on. We did multiple options in looking at various solutions to this, and I think this was, I think for us, the way for us to maybe to honor the church by having as least impact as possible while creating the most efficient means of getting cooling air and having a pleasant environment on the inside. So we kind of worked our way into coming up with this solution. Again, which by painting the louver, we're providing something that, from a distance, you may not really see it, or certainly it's going to blend in with the stonework. So I don't think I have anything else to add, but if you have any questions, please feel free.
Okay, thank you, Debbie and Alfred. Do we have any other questions from the commissioners or comment? Okay, I will just make one comment. I do think that from my perspective, this does, solve the problem that the church has, as well as not only, the church not having adequate air conditioning, not only from a comfort level, we know what it feels like in Texas in the heat, but also this is a historic asset that we all value. It's a beautiful asset in our community, but also not having appropriate air conditioning, HVAC systems, I think could probably cause other problems within this historic structure that we don't want to see happen. So I appreciate the time and attention that's been put towards this proposal and making sure that the church continues to be the beautiful historic asset that we have in our community. So that's my comment. All right, anyone else? Last time. Okay, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chairman, I move for approval of item G, certificate of appropriateness.
Thank you, Steve. Do I have a second?
This is Carol Lee, and I second.
Thank you. I have a motion to approve as written. I will call for the vote. Commissioner Hyde, oh, I'm sorry, I need point of clarification. Commissioner Hyde had to drop off, so Robert, if you could please vote on this item. Commissioner Morales.
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston.
Yes.
Commissioner Curry. Commissioner Curry.
Approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Nunn.
Approve.
Commissioner McCabe.
Approve.
And Commissioner Mitchell.
Approve.
Thank you. That motion approves. The motion carries. Okay. Last item, our lovely city staff. What updates do you have for us tonight?
Well, the sun is beginning to set in the west, and so I am lucky enough to have a window, but I look like the Hamburglar now. So I got vertical and horizontal stripes on. I want to thank Britton for carrying what is an 1 hour and 40-minute agenda, but in staff time represents at least 20 hours of diligence in writing the staff reports. And I want to compliment her on her research that is both for your benefit, but also the applicant's benefit, and working with those who were initially seeking to get a certificate of appropriateness for design, but ended up being a demolition. So I know
I
it's with.
second that too. That was extraordinary. That was a great job, Britton.
Thank y'all very much. I really do appreciate that. That was, I do honestly believe that that was the best outcome, is to get a record that we can share with the public. And I think that that was the way that we would be able to accomplish that. And one of the beautiful things about this work is that we're able to share stories of properties that may not otherwise come to light. And I hope that really enriches our community and really shows the value of the work that y'all do for our community. So thanks. And I'm just so glad to see everybody again.
Yeah, and I want to echo that, Britton, thank you so much. I know that, Britton and I talked offline about this project as well. And, the demo subcommittee, we really, thought through that project. It's, none of us want to lose old historic assets, but Britton did a great job detailing all of that, and really wanted us to look at it from a structural standpoint, and then added all the history so you all could see it. We didn't see that at the demo subcommittee because she really wanted us to make an assessment based on the structural condition of the position of the project without having all of that history and then bringing it back in. But so I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Britton. So
just a couple of updates for you for the benefit of the group. Excuse me. We put out a request for proposals on an update to the Downtown and Old Town Historic Design Guidelines based on the direction council gave us in April of 2019. And we had 3 successful interviews, and we are in the process of narrowing it down to the best fit. We will keep you advised as to the process, but then also we will be engaging with you on the content and revisions to that, because we want to make sure that you guys are involved with that process. So look, keep posted. We are hoping to get that work started in early August, maybe late August, but at least in the coming few weeks. So stay tuned for that. Also want to share with you that the City Council directed staff to begin reaching out to the neighborhoods of San Jose and the Track Ridge Grasshopper neighborhood. And if you're not familiar with that area, that is the area directly west of City Hall, but then extends south along scenic, south of University to approximately 17th Street. And we're working to define that neighborhood more specifically with those who live there. But the council also directed that we begin working with the residents of the San Jose neighborhood, which is in near approximate Southeast Georgetown. It is just on the border of Old Town, located primarily between the railroad tracks by Annie Pearl and Maple Street, with San Jose Park along 15th being its northern boundary. The purpose of that is really to work with the community to find issues and celebrate things that are going right in those neighborhoods. So the next step for us is to begin dialogue with those residents to find out what are the issues. We know, and Britton can share with you a little bit what she's very well versed in the history of certainly the TRG neighborhood and somewhat of the San Jose neighborhood, but we do anticipate there can be some cultural and historical aspects to both of these plans. And so Britton will be involved with it, but we also want to keep you involved. You may know that San Jose does have quite a few resources identified in our 2016 survey, and the TRG neighborhood also has some. So more to come on that. We anticipate visiting with the council on August 11th to share a draft scope, as well as begin the formal process to recruit team members to help us with that effort. Also want to share with you, we're in budget season. The city manager has had a workshop with the city council this week, and the city budget will be finalized the first week of September. So the staff continues to stay involved with that. We have been working through the impacts of sales tax as well as expected property tax collections. And the city manager is working to maintain a balanced budget approach with the city council. So that process is also ongoing. There was one other item I just wanted to make sure that Britton had asked if she could provide an update on our last demolition project. Britton?
Thank you so much. So wanted to provide y'all with an update because as we kind of go through the requests that y'all are asked to make decisions on, I think this is always a process of continuous improvement. And so we had gotten some, I don't mind saying we've gotten some concerns about whether or not the floor had been salvaged prior to the demolition of that structure, which took place on, if I remember correctly, July 2nd. And so Chansley is constructing the new project, and so he shared photos with me showing that wood floor had been salvaged. It is sitting in a shop right now and waiting to be reprocessed. So the nails have to be stripped out. The wood's got to be sanded down and refinished and ready to install. But what I did not know previously, and what I thought was worth sharing, that wood floor is supposed to go in the new house that he is constructing at 1207 Walnut. And I've asked for photos once that installation is complete, that I can kind of share those back out with you. But it looks like the floor that y'all conditioned the approval on salvaging is going to continue its life in our Old Town Historic District, but in a new home. And so I was really glad to see that that's something that is able to go with us. And I know that there are probably sometimes questions of what is the value of requesting salvage or requiring people to reuse these things. And I think this is a great illustration of why we would ask people for something like this, because these materials can continue to have life even in our own historic district. And so I think that's kind of one of the better aspects of a salvage requirement. And so hopefully I'll be able to get those photos when that's installed and kind of share that back with y'all as an update. And I think that's what we're looking to do also is to share kind of later in the process what happens with some of these projects and what are those outcomes. So if y'all haven't had the chance to drive by or walk by and see, we can still bring that information to y'all. So again, we can kind of have this continuous feedback, and staff can always be looking for ways that we can improve the information that we provide to y'all and how we communicate information also with our applicants. And one of the reasons that I tried to be very explicit with one of our conditions that staff was recommending tonight is we want to feel that when we are making these conditions for approval, that we have a way to ensure that those conditions are being met. So that was part of what was driving being very specific in this instance we want to make sure we have a way to get that document before we lose what remains of that house. And so anytime that we have the chance to do that kind of work and to create those partnerships, we would definitely want to take those opportunities. So hopefully there's a shiny new looking wood floor in your future as far as photos go.
Nat, can I make one comment on that? You know, as chair of the commission, and then, you know, having all of you all who spend, you know, your time on this, you know, when this last project occurred, you know, Britton and I talked, and, you know, I think it's important that we all, you know, can stand behind what we are saying that we're asking people to do. And so, you know, I think Britton's doing a great job now of, you know, this follow through. And I love seeing, you know, we hate to lose assets, but it's important that we're going to ask people to do an archive and we're going to ask people to do salvage. What does that mean? And can we actually then pinpoint to how that was actually followed through with in the future, so that there are never any missteps where, you know, it's, well, that, how did anyone ever document that happened? And so I think we now are coming up with a documentation process, which is great. So thank you for that. Nat, my only other question is, what is the meeting plan moving forward?
In terms of virtual versus in person?
Yes.
I do not expect us to go back towards in-person meetings in the near future. The last direction I got was that we're going to continue virtual meetings. But if there are things that we can do better for that process, we would welcome your feedback and to continue to make this a good experience for you all.
I just want to say this was much better. We don't have the delay in the PowerPoint anymore. We don't have to wait and hold our breath as the slides come up. So I think you've been making great improvements since we first started.
Agreed. I echo that. Thank you all so much for moving to Zoom. And also thank you, commissioners, for being willing to be on video. Obviously, if there's ever a time that you're not comfortable with that, you can be on the phone, but I think you know, it's important that people see us and know that we're working on behalf of the city, and that the city's continuing the progress forward, and that there are no delays due to the very unusual circumstances that we have all found ourselves in at this point. So love the cat, Pam, look at that. Anyway, okay, well, thank you all very much. Anything else, Nat, before I make a motion to adjourn?
No, ma'am, just that motion in the second.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. It's Catherine Morales.
Okay, second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Pam. All right, we are adjourned. We will see you all in a couple weeks. Have a great evening.
Bye all. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.